Does anyone else see the flaw in our plan? It's gonna be kind of difficult to get his shoulder yellow with 3 shotguns. Yellow. Nice. First try is crazy. 72 million. Yo guys, what is up? Max in our first Descendant video, and today we're going over my updated guide for Gley. Now, before we dive into the video, I want to make one thing clear, and that is that the actual amount of catalyst that I've spent on Gley from the past video to this video is 1. We've only spent 1 catalyst, and that 1 catalyst, we tried to make it so that we're getting the most out of all of her different builds for mobbing, for bossing, for using guns, for using Massacre. But we do have some more significant changes to her weapons that we're going to be using, to the components and some of the mods. So there's a lot of min-maxing that I've done, and a lot of testing that's been had to kind of min-max her even more than I had her before. But this is not a overly heavily catalyst update. I've only spent 1 on her since the last video. So for the form of this video, we're going to start by talking about her gun build, then we're going to talk about her mobbing / AoE build, and then lastly we will talk about her Massacre build, since that's technically the most complicated and will probably take the longest. Now, Gley is a great gun Descendant because with her 3rd ability, she can get infinite ammo. Now, there's a lot of really powerful guns that Gley can use, like the Greg's Reverse Fate, like the Enduring Legacy. However, these are weapons that other Descendants can use really well as well. Haley and Enzo and Valby and Blair are all really strong with Greg's Reverse Fate and Enduring Legacy. You could even say even stronger because they're able to buff up the crit hit rates of these things, which is ridiculous, and allows those characters to deal a ton of damage. What those characters can't do is use the newly buffed Executor. The devs recently buffed the Living Daylights out of this thing, and Gley is really the only character that can effectively use it because it shoots so fast and it consumes ammo so quickly, and Gley has infinite ammo. And so not only is Gley the best Descendant with the Executor, but also in my testing, comparing it to other weapons on her and her Massacre build for bossing, nothing is out DPSing the Executor right now, besides one niche case build scenario that I'm going to go over with Gley that you kind of need an Enzo for. But the Executor, if you are playing alone, is just going to be your strongest DPS option. Now, part of the reason for this is when you get the Executor to 4 out of 4 abilities, it stacks up to 33% flat critical hit rate every stack. So this gets 99% critical hit chance, and it has 1% base critical hit chance. So this thing gets to 100% critical hit rate, which Gley, obviously, she doesn't have a way to buff up Gun's crit rate. So this weapon works out fantastically for her because she can just build it for raw damage and not worry about crit, which is exactly what I've done here. The biggest thing about this build is we have an open space for an element. So this is my Executor build, and it's a ton of damage, but it's also super versatile because if you want to go fight Gluttony, you can put on Fire. If you want to go fight Devour, you can put on Electric. If you're going to go fight Pyromaniac, you can put on Chill. This build does a ton of damage. It's led me to all of my fastest kills on Gley. Even comparing it to Massacre Gley, it is significantly easier and faster to kill bosses with this thing with our weapon platform build, which we're about to go over. The one thing that I do want to point out is this shotgun isn't as great for fighting enemies that have weak points that are kind of far away because its damage fall off is really, really rapid. So if you are going to go fight Swamp Walker or you're going to go fight Frost Walker, those two bosses that kind of have their big weak points up high, where they've got those shoulders and you can't really shoot them from the ground. Like you can like kneecap, devour, and pyro and dead bride. Those characters, I would recommend using the Greg's Reverse Fate and the Enduring Legacy. This is the build for the Enduring Legacy. I obviously don't use it on Gley very often, honestly, because I just think that there's other Descendants that use it better than her. Because, like, you know, the whole thing with the Enduring Legacy is it's a big LMG, so you can fire it for a really long time, and Gley makes things that fire for a short time better. And so I just don't think you need to use this on Gley, but if you did want to min-max it, I would go with this Insight Focus, and I would swap the Expand Weapon Charge for Insight Focus for more crit hit rate and crit damage. Obviously, you don't need the mag size on Gley specifically. The weapon I do use on Gley a fair bit is the Greg's Reverse Fate. Once again, my build for this hasn't changed. If you did want to catalyze some extra elements onto this thing, you could go for like fire. I currently left it at electric because I haven't used an catalyst on this thing, but the Greg's Reverse Fate pumps damage, and with Mental Focus, which buffs up the meteors or the comets that come down, Gley can hit really hard with this thing and fire it very, very quickly, where normally you'd have to reload this thing quite often. So showing on screen is my old Gley build for her weapon platform. Note that we were using Predator Instinct. We had 2 focus mods for max cooldown. We had 1 HP mod, and those are all things that we're going to be adjusting for our updated weapon platform build. This is what we're rocking now. You'll note that I've swapped Shot Focus for an extra HP mod. So we now have Stim Accelerant, which gives us another 234% HP, which is massive. So this is a huge improvement to the build. We just have way more survivability. We didn't need to recatalyze Shot Focus because, or like recatalyze a C slot, because we're just going to be using a unranked focus on dimension. Doesn't really matter. Focus on non-attribute, focus on dimension. We're not using our abilities with this build, so we don't need a max ranked mod on this. So we're still getting the exact same amount of cooldown. So we did lose 6% cooldown, but we did gain 234% HP. We're also not going to be using Predator Instinct anymore. We'll talk about that in a second. But those are the big changes to the build. Basically, we lost a little bit of cooldown and gained a ton of HP. Now, how are we able to lose cooldown? 2 things. One, I wanted to show you something. So real quick, I personally have farmed up a reactor with skill duration up and skill cooldown. So for me right now with this like god roll, I am at a 9.8 second cooldown with a 9.6 second duration. So I can perfectly loop without having to get this like roll. But the thing about using weapon platform Gley is that your reactor roll and your mounting and all those things don't matter. It doesn't matter if it's like a non-attribute dimension thing, because Gley doesn't benefit from this. So you're just looking for any reactor with any element, with anything that rolls skill duration and skill cooldown. Now, what if you don't have like duration? What if you can only get cooldown? I wanted to show that to you. So this is a just skill cooldown reactor, for example. Now, if we put this on, now we have like 0.7 seconds. So if we have a 0.7 second gap. So now if I am shooting, you'll note that I'll go about down like 1 ammo. But it's not overly important for us to like perfect loop. Like me going down from 8 shotgun ammo down to 7 there doesn't matter, because we're, you know, it's not a Massacre build. The issue with like having a little bit of a delay on like a Massacre build is the fact that you could lose Massacre and then you're kind of run out of damage, unlike Massacre Gley. So you'll see that I am losing like 1 ammo there, but we are still like infinitely firing on an infinite loop. If that bothers you, you can just swap Stim Accelerant for Battle of Stamina. You do lose like 100% increased HP, but now with that, you'll see that I'm back to my 9.8, 9.6 duration. So even without a duration roll, you can now, this will perfectly loop. You won't lose a single shot of ammo. Losing a shot of ammo, once again, doesn't matter, because if you're out of ammo entirely, let's just get this down to 0 ammo. Even if you are at 0 out of 0 ammo, you can still shoot with Gley. So like, it doesn't matter if it perfectly loops or not. But if that does bother you, you can just rock Battle of Stamina instead. I really think that you should go for the more HP. Personally, that is what I'd recommend. But this build achieves a lot more survivability and still able to deal a lot of damage. The one thing I do want to mention before we talk about massive sanguification and why we're not using Predator Instinct is if you wanted to use this for more general use, like if you're doing a boss fight, for example, where you don't think the boss will die very quickly, you can use HP Collector. This is one of the new catalysts that I added to the build. And now we can just add HP Collector over there, and then we can add Shot Focus here. And now we've lost a little bit of defense, obviously, but now we also have HP Collector on the build. And then if, we're going to be fighting in extended fights, we have another way of healing ourselves. Yes, we did lose a little bit of defense, but the sustain for a longer fight is really nice. That's also why we have massive sanguification on. It's another way that we can sustain ourselves if we need to in longer fights. So now let's talk about why I'm not using Predator Instinct. Obviously, you can still use this, but the best weapons that Gley can use, this doesn't work for. So I don't think there's any point in using it. So if I pop Predator Instinct and I shoot the Enduring Legacy, you'll see like a little buff right there. See that number that pops up there? That's a 2. That gun sign right there. That is our Predator Instinct kicking in. And that is giving me 21% firearm attack. Now, you saw that little buff. Let's swap to the Executor, which is Gley's highest DPS option in the game. Pop R3. And you will see, like, even if I'm shooting these enemies, it does not proc. So it simply just does not work with the Executor, meaning that because it's not procking, you're not getting any damage increase from your 1, because you need this to proc to get the 15% fire or firearm damage, versus if you are not using it, you just click the button and then you get 15% damage. So Predator Instinct is a 15% damage loss with the Executor, which once again is her best option. I think her second best option for guns is Greg's Reverse Fate, and Predator Instinct also doesn't work for that. So like if you really wanted to use like an Enduring Legacy, you could use Predator Instinct, but for like the majority of weapons that she's actually good with, it doesn't work for. And so that's why we're going to use Massive Sanguification. If we are low and need some HP, we can hit Massive Sanguification and just get HP from enemies, which is really nice, as long as you drop your Frenzy state. So I think it's more useful, and technically it's more damage. So now we get to go over Gley's mobbing setup. Now, Gley obviously can mob with like a Thunder Cage or a rocket launcher, but where she's really unique is her ability to deal high AoE damage to a bunch of enemies. And while she doesn't hit the hardest, she hits in like the largest range in the game. As you can see, those enemies over there were hitting for like 200,000 damage. And when you're spamming this, you're gonna get pretty low on Gley. Gley has a trick that she can do that after you click your like AoE damage. So I'm gonna click my C. After I click that and I've dealt the damage, I can quickly turn off my frenzy, and if you cast this ability in non-frenzied, it heals you, but the game like thinks you're not in frenzy mode even though you dealt damage with it. So like if I do this and then hit the Q button, I actually get healed for a ton, and then I can re-hit Q and then damage those enemies again, and then I get a ton of damage, and I'm going to heal myself up. And this makes Gley basically unkillable as long as there's enemies nearby. You can just deal a bunch of damage, and then whenever you get low, you can just do her little trick, which is, once again, you hit your 2 ability, and then after the damage registers, you just turn off your frenzy and you'll get healed. Now, for mobbing on Gley, without a shadow of a doubt, the best thing that you can be holding is the Peacemaker. The Peacemaker has the unique ability that whenever you use a Dimension ability, which Gley's 2 is, her big massive sanguification, you're going to get stacking non-attribute skill power. This stacks up to like over 45% power, which is disgusting, and it'll beat out quite literally anything. I was doing some testing. I've got I don't have a like Peacemaker mounted reactor, just haven't farmed one, but it out damages all of my gold Python mounted reactors with boost ratio on it, just because the Peacemaker adds so much damage to our abilities. So this is the reactor that I'm using. Boost ratio and dimension boost ratio just to get it to hit as hard as possible would probably be what I would go for. Don't really need cooldown, don't really need range. But the big downside that the Peacemaker used to have is it used to make your skills cost 30% more. So you would just be draining more health while using Gley. Now it has zero downside. As you get it ranked up, it's got zero skill cost. Obviously, this thing is from Gluttony, so if you can't kill Gluttony a bunch of times, it will be hard to acquire. Then there's not really other options of great weapons to hold, to be honest. I just hold like the Python with your Python reactor. But if you do have a Peacemaker, it'll make your abilities hit significantly harder. So showing on screen is the old mobbing build that we had. We obviously couldn't recatalyze, so we had a multi-talented in the wrong slot. We were missing a mod, and we were using 2 focus mods. Now we're able to min-max this a bit more. So we're going to be changing out the focus on dimension for skill simplicity, which is going to give us more damage. We're going to be swapping in a spear and shield for more defense and more damage. And overall, the build is just simply better. So we swapped multi-talented in for where dimension was, and then we were able to put on skill simplification. This just gave us more damage because it's a bunch more modifier than the or the dimension. And we still have a ton of cooldown. Even though we lost 6 cooldown, it's still on a like 0-second cooldown. So we're able to just spam. And then we added spear and shield for more skill power and more defense, which all around this build is just better. It hits harder, we're more tanky, and we're dealing more damage because we're now incorporating the Peacemaker, which before we didn't have. So we're just dealing like for more than 45% more damage with this build, which is just awesome. Now we can talk about Massacre. Now Massacre is shooting your weapon with Glaze 4, but you add a skill damage to it. Think about a little bit like Haley's 4, where you're shooting your weapon and you're adding skill damage to it. With Gley, things that have high fire rate work best because then we can spray them with infinite fire rate. And I made a small adjustment. I actually think that the old build doesn't need any changing, to be honest. But I did make a small adjustment for the change that I made to the setup. This is the old setup. We're using focus on dimension and outstanding investment. That puts me at a 7.4 second cooldown with 9 seconds of duration, which is fantastic. The change that I made, once again, totally optional, is I swapped maximize duration, which makes us lose skill power modifier, right? But this now lasts for 10 seconds. And then I swapped to compensate for the lack of modifier. We swapped focus on dimension to an X slot. You saw that in the other build. And then we can put on skill simplification, which now we have a bunch more modifier to compensate for the lack of modifier. It's still technically a net damage loss. We lose like a little bit less than, like, I think it's like 4% less modifier technically with skill simplification to maximize duration. But we now get 10 seconds of duration. You can see that my cooldown is 9.8 seconds. And so in terms of like knowing when to time this just allows us to shoot a little bit longer. The God Roll reactor for this is with skill cooldown and damage to Colossus. I obviously don't have that. I do want to show you guys real quick that if I, for example, take off the duration roll and then just go straight to cooldown. So let's say we don't have a duration roll. Then we get to 9.8 and 9.6 seconds. You don't need the duration roll. It would be a lot better if I had a damage to Colossus roll on my reactor, but just to kind of show you that we don't need that, let's pull out our Python, pop our buffs real quick, and then show you that we can loop this. But we did make one big change, and that change is why I went for more duration. As you can see, we can loop, even though we don't have any duration on our reactor, so the duration really just is not important. We're not losing any bullets. We just spam click the V, and then we can keep shooting. But the reason duration is important, and the reason we're changing to more duration and using maximized duration is because of the Python. We are going to be swapping from mental focus to sharp precision shot. Now, the reason we're doing that is Pretty simple. Sharp precision shot is actually more damage. I went and did a bunch of testing on this. I found spreadsheets that hopefully are showing on screen right now from community members that had done a bunch of testing on this. And as long as you build high duration, sharp precision shot will actually out DPS mental focus. I've seen it in the numbers. We tested it, and it, one, feels better to use because you don't have to pre-fire mental focus. Mental focus, in order to get it really going, you have to pre-fire it before boss, which is just a pain in the butt to do. Sharp precision shot, you don't need to do that, but sharp precision shot has a longer buildup to its damage, and so the fact that we are going to be getting even more duration with putting on maximized duration on our Gley gives us more damage for sharp precision shot, where that wouldn't matter for like something like mental focus. And so we're going to be speccing furthermore into the better damage mod, and that is why we have more duration on our Gley for Massacre, and also we're doing that to supplement with sharp precision shot. The other thing that we're going to be doing is we are going to be using the Annihilation set for our Massacre Gley. I originally was rocking Slayer, and Slayer is better for mental focus Python, but Annihilation is better for sharp precision shot Python, once again, because we get more duration, which is really nice. And also, we are not getting as much firearm attack with sharp precision, like mental focus stacks to higher firearm. So we're going to be compensating for that by wearing the Annihilation set, which gives us more firearm. But the other thing that's really nice about the Annihilation set is we have a lot more survivability. For example, if we look at the Slayer set, we have defense, max shield, and HP. If we're wearing this to deal damage to bosses, we only get 1 HP piece. If we're wearing Annihilation, we get defense, HP. So inherently, we are going to have more survivability. We're going to be shooting for longer, and we're still going to be putting out like a little bit more damage. This setup does a little bit more damage than we did before, which is awesome. Now for mods, this is like my electric setup with sharp precision shot, electric enhancement, electric priority. I note that the Python can't really do crit damage because it just doesn't scale crit. However, we kind of run out of mods to use because we have all the weak point, we have all the element, we don't need reload, we don't need like mag size, and so we do put on a concentration priority, just because if the Python does crit with Massacre, then we're getting 120% increased damage on that hit. So that's fantastic, actually. So that's kind of I think last time I made this, I just had like a random mag size mod just because I didn't have anything else to fit. But we're going to be putting concentration priority. Other than that, the build really stays the same. We're just swapping mental focus for sharp precision, or sorry, vice versa. I do have a similar build for the Python, but with fire. Same thing, we're just adding fire and fire priority with fire rate. It seems like electric and fire are the two most important types to have right now for me personally. Fire for like, Gluttony and Frostwalker. Electric helps with Devour and Obstructor. And then I do have, pardon the name, the crit on that thing. Python build. Basically, the Python doesn't work well with crit, right? But if you play with an Enzo in your party, you can actually have an Enzo place his supply firearm enhancer on the ground. You need to activate your Massacre before you walk over it, and then you get supply firearm enhancer with the Python, and then you can build the Python for crit damage with using it on Massacre, and that is the only setup that I was able to compete in DPS with just the pure Executor build. So I'll show that to you right now. So I just hopped on Enzo. Obviously, I would be on Gley, but just like to show you what the buff looks like. We then get with an Enzo buff, we get a 61% firearm critical hit rate on our Python with a 4.28x multiplier and 4 times damage on weak points. So we're dealing a ton more damage, and we're able to scale its damage way higher. And this works really well with Massacre. This is the build. Basically, we are losing our accuracy mods. You could get rid of Edging Shot if you wanted to for Inside Focus, but I figured if we're going to lean into crit, we might as well really lean into it. So we got Edging Shot, better concentration, concentration priority, action and reaction, rifle reinforcement, weak point with have aiming, fire rate up, sharp precision, and better insight. For this, I didn't put on an element just because, with Catalyst, space, you know, just kind of take it to any boss rather than have to have multiple things. So no element on this. Obviously, if you wanted to slot in element, you could. I'd probably lose either edging shot or one of the weak point things, but that is the crit on that thing. Python build, which allows Gley to basically deal ridiculous damage in Massacre, but you need to have a Enzo with you. Lastly, for the group play build, it's basically the exact same build as the solo play. The only thing that we've swapped out is because for group play, bosses might be alive longer. We did lose a little bit of damage, but we pick up HP Collector for some quality of life so that if you are getting low, you can heal yourself with HP Collector. The reason I make group play builds different than solo play builds is most of the time, if you're playing in a group, bosses stay alive a little bit longer, and if bosses stay alive longer, you need more survivability because your chances of getting hit are larger. So having HP Collector, in my opinion, is a fine substitute. If you wanted to, you could just swap out Spear and Shield for Walk a Tightrope if you wanted to like make up for that little bit of lack of damage. I just haven't recatalyzed that yet, but it is definitely an option that you could do is HP Collector plus Walk a Tightrope and then just get rid of Spear and Shield. It would be a little bit less tanky, but you would be able to heal off ads. I don't find that necessary for solo play because in solo play, most of the time the boss is dead within the first minute. You're not really being prolonged to like shoot ads and get their health. So it's just not really important for solo. Guys, that's going to do it for the video. I hope you enjoyed. Gley is a more complicated character, and she can be a little bit frustrating to get the hang of. But once you do, she's very versatile. One of the most versatile Descendants. You can kind of bring her into any situation. And I hope you guys enjoyed the full build breakdown. I'll catch you on the next one. Take care, guys. Peace.